Israel is at war. I guess this was it.
On the morning of October 7th, 2023, Hamas militants launched a massive surprise attack from the Gaza Strip, striking deep into Israeli territory. Israel then retaliated with a series of airstrikes inside Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu declared that Israel is officially at war with Hamas. He then gave orders to his security forces
It's Hamas versus Israel.
to retake any Israeli villages that have Hamas militants in them. Hamas military commander Mohammed Deif said, quote, "This is the day of the greatest battle to end the last occupation on earth," end quote. So according to Hamas, this is only the beginning of a very long battle that they've been planning for. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is an incredibly sensitive and complex battle to cover. So I want to be upfront with you and let you know that I'm going to do my best to be as unbiased as possible and to focus on the ground war itself. What I'm not going to do is try to litigate the entire history of grievances between Israel and Palestine, which is an important aspect to the conflict, but it's beyond the scope of this video, and you can easily find that information elsewhere. We hear about skirmishes between Israel and Palestine frequently over the past few years, but what's different about this attack is its level of sophistication and coordination. Because prior to this attack, Hamas had used very different tactics focusing on mortars, kamikaze bombings, rocket attacks, and small arms ambushes against Israeli defense forces. This is a major departure from the old strategy of harassing attacks. Hamas militants attacked via flying in by paraglider, infiltrating from the Mediterranean Sea on boats, and tearing down barriers to move over land. So what we're going to do is
coming from different directions, from land and to the sea.
Analyze the situation on the ground using open source intelligence tools. At the end, we'll talk about the potential reasons for why this might be happening right now according to both sides. Take a look at this live conflict map here. It shows us geotagged evidence of what's happening on the ground in real time, linked to GPS coordinates. This Israeli checkpoint appears to have been overrun about 10 kilometers away from the 1950 Armistice Agreement line at the Gaza Strip. The extent of the militants' advance appears to be about 20 kilometers away from the border. So these roads here that we can see leading out of Gaza are protected by checkpoints. Video evidence shows right outside Gaza, this outpost was breached by Palestinian militants. Here we see militants captured a Namer heavy armored personnel carrier, and it's fitted with an expensive high-tech trophy active protection system that shoots down incoming RPGs. There also looks to be a Merkava Mark IV main battle tank left behind. Each of those systems costs about $6 million. Now Israel has an estimated 220 Namer IFVs and 400 Merkava tanks according to open source intelligence, so the loss of a dozen armored vehicles won't be a strategic level loss. But from Hamas's point of view, it's a major PR victory that they can parade these armored vehicles around Gaza now. Satellite mode on the live conflict map shows us the geography of the terrain located just outside
So what's the end point? What's the time to receive
Gaza
them?
Strip, inside Israel where the fighting is largely taking place. This area is flat, open fields and farmland that stretches until some major cities and built-up areas. Further to the south is the desert arid region. Israel had relied on fences and barbed wire as protection and defenses here. They possibly didn't expect an organized attack pre-planned to destroy these obstacles. The southern region of Israel is one of 6 different regions in the country. Its population in the southern region is about 79% Jewish and 12.7% Arab and Muslim. The population of the southern district is just over 1 million people, and its area is 14,185 square kilometers. It's the largest district in terms of land area, but the most sparsely populated. It covers most of the Negev desert as well as the Araba Valley. Looking at these Israeli outposts that are being overrun and attacked, they remind me of the outposts I lived on when I was in Iraq. We're talking about small combat outposts with likely 2 squads of 20 soldiers or a platoon of 40 soldiers rotating through the outpost. The way it works is 40 soldiers are on duty, manning guard towers, doing patrols, while the other 40 are off duty from the rotation, possibly back at a larger base. Obviously not many troops here protecting these areas. The base is probably about the size of a football field or two, and its main defense is that it's surrounded by slabs of concrete walls that are 12 feet high and several inches thick, so they're rated to stop small arms and RPGs. This type of outpost has a major weakness though, its entrance gate. where the concrete stops and opens up. An outpost like this would have between 4 and 8 armored vehicles likely stationed here. Gun battles are raging here, where the IDF is pouring in to try to reclaim these outposts. Checkpoints will be located strategically along the roads
I mean, it's still something better than nothing.
leading out of Gaza here. Each are equipped well enough to slow down a major offensive, but they're not really designed to stop an overwhelming force, and clearly they were caught by surprise. Outposts and checkpoints along the roads slowed down Hamas and gave Israel time to coordinate a larger retaliation attack. But Hamas still reached several major towns with populations of around 30,000 people. You can see here in the live conflict map that all of the orange tags inside of Gaza Strip that you're looking at here are Israeli retaliatory strikes, including artillery and air sorties. Some of the icons show helicopters, which tells us that Israel's AH-64 Apache attack helicopter is going to work on targets inside Gaza, with the AGM-114 Hellfire missiles or Hydra rockets. Israel has a total of 81 attack helicopters of different varieties. Dozens of Israeli Air Force fighter jets struck Hamas targets inside the Gaza Strip on October 7th. According to the Israeli Air Force, 17 Hamas military compounds and 4 command headquarters of Hamas throughout the Gaza Strip were struck on October 7th. Israel operates the American-made F-15, F-16, F-35, and the French Mirage 2000 bomber with an inventory of about 580 combat aircraft in total. Hamas reportedly struck 4 Israeli helicopters with surface-to-air missiles so far, likely with the Russian-made handheld 9K-38 Igla. Part of the reason this attack is concerning for Israel is because preliminary reports indicate that Hamas struck deep enough to force Israel to evacuate one of their air bases near the Gaza Strip. According to this video evidence that we see here, jets are being moved to safety. Reports on the ground claim Hamas gunmen are opening fire on any Israeli cars that pass by in the town of Sderot. The fighting is happening in Sderot at the
civilians.
police station here. This city has a population of about 30,000 people, and it's located less than 1 mile from the Gaza Strip. Israel spent over $150 million on bomb shelters here due to the fact that over 8,000 rockets have been fired at them since 2001. Footage on social media show firefights raging inside this city, and Hamas gunmen appear to be patrolling the countryside here at this point in time. I've gone through and watched all of the videos that have been posted online, and there's a lot I'm not going to show you here, and it's the kind of things you probably wouldn't want to see anyway. It's absolutely awful what's unfolding right now to the people who live here. The live conflict map shows us how Hamas used a homemade 114mm short-range Rajam missile system in their offensive against Israel, which is a kind of rocket artillery meant to saturate an area. This is a tool that helped Hamas fire 5,000 rockets so quickly into Israel. There's usually only a 15-second warning from Israel's air defense system and alarm system when the rockets are first fired. Even though these aren't large munitions, the sheer volume of fire is designed to overwhelm Israel's air defense system attempting to shoot down these rockets. The rocket attacks have reached into Israel's capital city of Tel Aviv. This live update shows internet activity has gone down inside the capital from the attacks. Israel has 170,000 active duty personnel, but they also have 465,000 reserve forces to pull from because service is mandatory in Israel, and according to their military, they're prepared to mobilize hundreds of thousands of reservists now in response to these attacks. Israel has conscription, and it's considered kind of a rite of passage for them. You might wonder why there isn't a long trench along the entire region here. The reason the defenses are set up as spread out checkpoints along the roads, instead of one long trench or one single front line, is partly because it would be extremely expensive and taxing on the Israeli army to man that fortification with thousands of soldiers year-round if it was a clear front line that extended and stretched for 70 kilometers long around the entire Gaza Strip. So instead, troops are spread out to defend major population centers, and some of these places appear to have been overrun. Whether that's briefly or not yet, we don't know. DefenseBlog.com reported at least 5 Israeli Merkava tanks have been captured, and 15 of Israel's tracked vehicles, like the M113s, are in Palestinian fighters' hands. The larger tanks probably aren't going to be as useful to Hamas because they likely wouldn't be able to maintain them or rearm them effectively for a long period of time, but the smaller armored vehicles would be an important asset for them. militants fired an estimated 5,000 rockets into Israel so far during their offensive operation. Israel's facing between 25,000 and 40,000 militant fighters in this offensive. Now you might say that's nothing compared to Israel's 170,000 active duty soldiers, but that's not exactly an accurate way to think about it, because Israel's soldiers need to be spread out over the entire country, for one, and they need to be relocated to the south now. Second, a higher ratio of Israel's forces are support and logistics, not combat arms, infantry, or frontline troops. Third, many of those soldiers would not be on duty right now. The main IDF military base in this region is called Re'im, where the Gaza division was located, which was either captured by Hamas at one point or contested until about 8 p.m. local time, when the IDF reported that they had recaptured it. So far, estimates place 200 Israeli KIA and over 1,600 wounded, and 5 soldiers as well as dozens of civilians are said to be captured by Hamas. Retaliation strikes from Israel reportedly killed 200 Palestinians and over 1,000 wounded as well. Although this is a developing situation, all of this information is subject to change. One of the ways we can confirm the extent of the offensive is satellite imagery of fire caused by the fightings, as seen here. The furthest extent of the fighting seems to be the town of Afkim in Israel, with a population of 34,000 people. It's reportedly under attack and hostages have been taken here. It's about 22 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. According to the IDF, they're fighting at 22 different locations across southern Israel right now. We see here that Israel's second biggest power station, Rutenburg, just outside Gaza, was struck. Another geotag clash shows an Israeli Merkava tank taking a direct hit from a drone, dropping a bomb straight on top of its weaker top armor. This is a tactic that has
The drone one is coming.
recently become commonplace on the battlefield in Ukraine. Israeli tanks are designed with more armor on the top turret than some other countries because they're specifically meant to operate in urban conditions, so it's unclear from the footage how much damage was done to the tank, if it was totaled or still salvageable. What we do know is that the engine is located in the front of the Merkava, unlike the Abrams, so the fire in this video could be the engine up in flames. This strategy of using drones was also used against a remote weapon system that shows how easily these drones can take out expensive remote-controlled turrets. The section of territory highlighted in red on the map shows us the extent to which Hamas units have pushed into Israel. These sections are currently being contested, and we can see its limit that they've reached about 22 kilometers at its furthest point, although I've been watching throughout the day, and I can tell you that the red sections have gotten smaller throughout the day, so we don't know where this is going yet. It appears like Israel is already pushing the militants back. It's important to keep in mind that Palestinians in Gaza are ruled by the group known as Hamas that's doing these attacks right now, and the Palestinians in the West Bank are under the rival party, Fatah. Fatah is in charge of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, and they rule the West Bank. They have renounced violence. I'm oversimplifying some of this, but the PLO receives aid from the United States and the European Union. The US sends about $500 million over the course of 3 years, and the EU has sent about $600 million per year to Palestine. The US perspective here is that they have attempted to send aid money to Palestine while attempting to prevent that aid from being used to fund military endeavors. Palestine has a population of 4.9 million people, and Israel has a population of 9.3 million. But who is Hamas in the first place? They're a militant movement and one of the Palestinian territory's 2 major political parties. Hamas is known for governing 2 million Palestinians. It was in 1988 that Hamas first published what is their charter. The charter basically called for the destruction of Israel, and they originally wanted to establish an Islamic society inside what is known as historic Palestine. Since then, in 2017, Hamas has walked that back a little bit and created a new document that seemed to accept an interim Palestinian state along the quote-unquote Green Line border that was established before the Six-Day War. For regular old dummies like me, it can be confusing to figure out where Palestine is, because it includes the West Bank, which is territory between modern-day Israel and Jordan, as well as the Gaza Strip, which borders what's modern-day Israel and Egypt. These territorial lines have frequently changed over the past few decades, also making it more complicated. Sometimes, like in this case, a state, territory, or nation can be split into different parts that aren't connected to each other. When this happens, we say this territory is fragmented or discontinuous. Even talking about these kinds of seemingly non-controversial aspects can get you into hot water though, because 138 out of 193 countries recognize Palestine as an actual country. The United States does not. Meanwhile, 165 out of 193 countries recognize Israel as a country. When a territory is split, it can lead to political disputes and conflicts may arise from these geographical divisions. From Israel's perspective, they're fearful that they could face attacks from both the east in Gaza and west from the West Bank. There's a route or corridor that connects the West Bank to Gaza Strip, which Israel monitors to make sure weapons aren't being shipped between them. To get an idea of what type of Hamas units are participating in this attack, we see here it's the Al-Qassam Brigades from the Sakir Squadron. They're one of the units participating in what Hamas is calling Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, although I've also seen it called Al-Aqsa Storm elsewhere. Israel's calling their response their counteroffensive Operation Iron Sword. What happens is many of these smaller outposts are getting hit, and now Israel will respond from larger bases that have been positioned further away from the front. The Israeli military did confirm that several towns are in Hamas's control as of October 7th. The United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin made a statement about the attack, saying, quote, "Our commitment to Israel's right to defend itself remains unwavering, and I extend my condolences to the families of those who lost their lives in this abhorrent attack on civilians. Over the coming days, the Department of Defense will work to ensure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself and protect civilians from indiscriminate violence and terrorism. A large portion of Israel's military technology and equipment comes from the United States. There are U.S. troops stationed in Israel right now, and according to Brigadier General Pat Ryder, the Pentagon's top spokesman, these soldiers are safe and accounted for with no troop movements planned right now. According to this U.S. government document, the U.S. in 2022 upped their military aid to Israel from $2.6 billion per year in 1999 to today standing at about $3.8 billion in assistance. Part of this aid was designed to make Israel's defense more self-sufficient, stating, quote, "U.S. military aid also has helped Israel build its domestic defense industry, which now ranks as one of the top global arms exporters. Israel spends 4.3% of their $488 billion GDP on defense, or about $23 billion in 2022. Hamas, on the other hand, likely spends $1 billion annually and receives their funding from a various assortment of nations, including Iran. In fact, the U.S. State Department claims Iran provides $100 million to Hamas each year. Although U.S. sanctions against Iran after pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal might have limited this number more recently. Dozens of countries, including the United States and the European Union, have designated Hamas as
supporting each other.
an official terrorist organization. The U.S. added them to that list in 1997. On the other hand, many other nations only apply that label of terror organization specifically to its military wing. Some people in the United States are angry at President Biden for working out a prisoner exchange deal with Iran, where the United States recently, about a week ago, unfroze $6 billion of funds for Iran, which critics claim could be used to fund Hamas. And what was Iran's response to the attacks in Israel on October 7th? Iran's leader Ayatollah Khamenei, top military advisor, said Tehran supported the attacks by Hamas against Israel on Saturday and would continue to back the Islamist fighters, quote, until the liberation of Palestine and Jerusalem. And this starts to get us into the crux of the issue here and why this attack might have possibly occurred. The attack took place on a Jewish holiday 50 years and 1 day after the Egyptian and Syrian forces attacked Israel during the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. There is suspicion that Iran might have played a very direct role in helping to support and plan these attacks by Hamas against Israel. Why now? The suggested reason is that Iran is trying to prevent their main rival, Saudi Arabia, from normalizing ties with Israel. On the other hand, Palestinian news outlets claim the attack is because 2023 has been the deadliest year for Palestine in over 2 decades, with 200 Palestinians being killed this year. So from Palestine's point of view, they're claiming that they say that this is because of atrocities committed by Israel. It could be a combination of several different factors. The United States would like to see Saudi Arabia and Israel sign some kind of agreement to normalize relations. According to the Saudi Crown Prince
You can blame this on one thing.
Mohammed bin Salman, they're getting closer and closer to reaching a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That alliance would have been very bad news for Iran, Since 2020, there's been a group of different Arab countries, including and led by the United Arab Emirates, that have opened up diplomatic relations with Israel. This is a concept known as rapprochement that's important to understand here. Rapprochement basically means an establishment or resumption of harmonious relations between two countries. And it appeared like the Middle East was possibly heading towards resolving some long-held disputes. The Saudi Foreign Ministry put out an official statement and called for an immediate halt to the fighting, protection for civilians, and they also noted its previous warnings to Israel about the effects of its ongoing occupation of Palestinian territory. That's what Saudi Arabia said. Here's footage of Iran's parliament yelling death to Israel, which might be why people believe Iran planned this attack. So these attacks by Hamas could be an attempt to prevent this alliance between Israel and Saudi Arabia from going through. What might happen from here on out is that Israel may launch wider attacks against Hamas in Gaza. I mean, if we look back at the 2008 conflict in Gaza, the war zone run by Tyler Rodgeway pointed out that at that time, Israel launched a 15-day-long ground assault into Gaza on January 3rd, 2009. And that attack resulted in 1,440 Palestinians being KIA and only 13 Israeli deaths. And according to a 2009 U.S. Congressional Research Service report, quote, Israel's technological superiority and reliance on heavy armor and firepower contributed to a wide disparity in casualties. So it's possible that we could see that happen again. It's also possible that Hezbollah could open up a second front in the north on Israel's northern border, or more attacks could come from the West Bank. If you want to stay in the loop and up to date on this issue, follow me at Cappy Army.